على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. So we are going to continue discussing Imam Ghazali rahmatullahi alayhi's iqtisad fi iqtisad, and we have been discussing the attributes of Allah. We've mentioned the 7 primary attributes. We're discussing certain important clarifications which Imam Ghazali has brought in his book, and now we're discussing some contentions regarding some of the attributes and how is it that they can be eternal if they seem to relate to new events. So it says here, وَأَمَّا الْكَلَامُ فَكَيْفَ يَكُونُ قَدِيمًا وَفِيهِ إِخْبَارُ عَمَّا مَضَى. How can the speech be eternal when there is information in it of what has passed? فَكَيْفَ قَالَ فِي الْأَزَلِ إِنَّ أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَى قَوْمِهِ. How is it that he could have said in pre-eternity that we have soon Nuh alayhi salam to his qawm? We have mentioned how a speech, a statement, is from Allah's perspective, how it is not dependent on time, it is not temporal. So tense facts do not apply to Allah because He is outside of time, and He expresses the Quran, the words and the sounds and the letters, according to His kalam nafsi, and they are in a mode which we can understand, and they are written in a perfect manner in the Arabic language. So some examples that this objection is based on are verses like فَخْلَعْنَا عَلَيْكَ to Musa alayhi salatu wassalam, and this is said to him before Musa alayhi salam was created. However, remember, Allah is not within time, He is not temporal, and so these temporal facts and temporal statements cannot be used against Allah. Its objection is based on the speech having sound. So Imam Ghazali rejects this because we don't believe the divine speech or the kalam nafsi is not sound, but it's a meaning that exists eternally in Allah's essence. So when we say that when we describe the kalam nafsi, we are referring to this divine speech, and we have already discussed this in the section of kalam, that exists within Allah's essence. So temporal expressions, they must of course reflect temporal events. So when these words are expressed in the universe through a prophet to his audience, then they will be reflected in accordance to that which they must understand. And of course, we are beings which can only comprehend things that exist within the temporal order. So these words and these events must be dictated or expressed to us through using tense facts, using temporal expressions. And this expression may change. The expression may change, like we will send versus we have sent, depending on the temporal context. So the meaning, the ma'na in Allah's essence remains unchanged. It eternally encompasses all times. So someone might ask, oh, does Allah know right now that I am doing this? So this meaning of the meaning of you, this meaning of what you are doing, it exists with Allah all the time. However, the way that this meaning of what you are doing right now is expressed, that might change. However, that meaning remains with Allah at all times. That at this time right now, I am doing this this commentary. Allah knows this eternally. However, the way that this will be expressed from a temporal perspective might change. Like tomorrow I will say, yesterday I did this, and yesterday I would have said, tomorrow I will do this. However, Allah does not change, and Allah is not affected by these temporal events, and therefore for Him this meaning remains unchanged, and Allah does not change. And then there's an issue as well. How about commands? How does it make sense for Allah to issue commands when the one who is commanded does not even exist? Like فَخْلَعْنَا عَلَيْكَ to Musa alayhi salam. So this is like a father intending to command a future son. This means the command exists conditionally before the son exists. So if there's an individual who intends to have a son in the future, or his wife is pregnant and he is to have a son, he has it firmly within his heart, within himself, to command his son to do something. When the son comes into existence and understands it, he's responding to that pre-existing will or command. So this shows that command can exist. And you hear this a lot of the times, that someone will say, if I have kids, I will definitely not allow them to do such and such a thing. For example, these liberals, they have these debates with these conservatives, these I guess you could say traditionalists, but even they are liberals to an extent. But one of them was saying, when your daughter grows up, would you allow her to do whatever she wants? Would you allow her to go on dates with loads of men and whatever she wants? And he said, no, I will definitely not allow her to do this. So he is in a position of commanding, and this will exists within him. This command of telling her not to do this thing exists within him already before she even reaches that age where she could possibly date. And of course, in this context, now in this day and age, that's in the primary schools, subhanAllah. Secondly, words are created things, and this is obvious, and meanings, however, are eternal. So the verbal commands like seek knowledge are created signs. So this is a verbal command, to seek knowledge. However, these are verbal commands and they are created signs. And of course, words, anyone that is a master of language, they will easily be able to tell you that communication, language, words and letters and sounds, these are used to indicate and signify that the intent of the speaker. So these verbal commands are created signs pointing to an eternal intent. So the command does not require the immediate presence of the commanded being existing, only the possibility of his existence. And of course, because Allah's will is eternal, Allah's will eternally determines what event will occur from pre-eternity at time one, at T1, at time 1, time 2, time 3, etc. Allah's will determines all of these things, and because they have been done from eternity, his commands are already set. So the possibility of their existence becomes a necessary existence, and we've discussed this, how something which is possible, everything that occurs is a possible existence, but from the perspective of Allah's will and knowledge and power, they are necessary, not in and of themselves, but necessary by another. So then there's an analogy with Allah's power. Just as Allah is called powerful before any object of power exists, so just because Allah hasn't caused the universe, there is no one that says Allah isn't powerful. Likewise, Allah can be called a commander even before a commanded being exists, because the object. Because this is a linguistic and a language related issue. This theological discussion and a lot of these theological debates are related to language. So if it's possible in language to say Allah is powerful before He expresses His power, before there's an object, because in language you have a subject and an object. In certain situations, certain sentences, then that you'd still call him powerful even before that thing he has power over does not exist yet. And Allah can be called an amir, a commander, or someone, an amir, which means someone that issues commands, before a ma'mur exists. So this is a linguistic, and he highlights this now, this is a linguistic versus an ontological issue. So this is a partially semantic debate. Does the name command Amir apply to Allah before an object exists? Or even you could say, as Allah speaker, mutakallim. Does he have kalam? And Imam Ghazali is saying yes, if the command or the speech is known and real in meaning, even if it's not actualized yet. So, and then there's an analogy: a dying parent's command may be obeyed after death even. So this analogy is being used to show that it isn't necessary for a command to be followed immediately once it's been issued. There can be a separation between the command and it being obeyed with a delay, so they don't have to exist simultaneously. So our dying parent's command may be obeyed after death, though the command and parent no longer exist in the world. So the command itself, which was uttered by the parent, doesn't exist anymore, and the parent, of course, the agent, doesn't exist. They no longer exist in the world. So similarly, divine commands can exist without being tied to temporal speech or presence. So the point of this analogy was to show that a command does not necessarily need to exist simultaneously with the commanded being, and therefore Allah's divine command can exist without being tied to temporal speech or presence. So the conclusion of this is Allah's essence contains eternal commands and speech. There's no need for Allah to undergo change or a locus of temporal events, hawadith. The created words and signs reveal eternal meanings, and these meanings themselves are timeless. So if we have this kind of interpretation, then it allows us to keep firm to the Quran and Hadith, and without deviating, and also reconciling between apparent logical contradictions that may arise based on the previous arguments that we have given, and we've been able to resolve those issues. Now we're going on to Al-Hukm al-Rabi', the fourth ruling with regards to the attributes, the names which are derived from the 7 attributes. So not all 99 actually are derived from the 7 attributes, but the ones that are derived from them, then they are eternally true for Allah. However, the names derived from Allah's actions, like Allah being the creator, or the Razik, the provider, they're disputed regarding the eternal truth. So you could say that Allah's names can be categorized into 4 types. And so the first are those names referring only to Allah's essence. For example, Al-Mawjud. So if you say Allah is the existent, Al-Mawjud, this is always true, eternally and pre-eternally and post-eternally. وهذا صادق أزلا وأبدا. So pre-eternally and post-eternally. And الثاني ما يدل على الذات مع زيادة سلب كالقديم. So these are names which refer to the essence and they have a negation with them as well. So for example, Al-Qadim, it means Allah is eternal. And what does this mean? It means that he was not preceded by non-existence. So this attribute is accompanied by a negation. So what we're doing is we are negating something for Allah. So we are saying that Allah was not preceded by non-existence. So that means that he, unlike us, which before us we did not exist, so we cannot say that before Allah he did not exist. Allah wasn't preceded by non-existence. He was always existed. And Al-Baqi, which means the everlasting, this means he was not followed by non-existence. This, in other words, Allah will not end. Al-Wahid, that means Allah is the one. So this is a negation of partners. So it means that he has no other partners. Al-Ghani, which is the self-sufficient. This means Allah is, what we are doing here is we are negating need from Allah. And these names are always true from eternity, right? This is based on necessary absence of the opposite qualities. So because the opposite of these things cannot exist, cannot be real, cannot be instantiated in any way, these attributes must always be true. The third is that names referring to the essence plus an attribute of meaning. Like what we mean by the essence plus an attribute, as we've previously explained, is that the essence itself cannot be reduced to these attributes, or that the attributes themselves cannot be reduced to the essence. They are not equivalent or identical to the essence because there is a meaning there that distinguishes them from these other sifat ma'ani. And these are always true for Allah from eternity. These attributes, these meanings must always be true for Allah. And of course there are other attributes from the 99 names which we know of that can also fall under this category because they have a similar meaning to this. For example, Al-Amir and وما يرجع إلى هذه الصفات السبعة كالآمر والناهي والخبير ونظائره. So Al-Amir, Al-Nahi, Al-Khabir, and similar ones. What I'm trying to say is, remember I said that certain attributes people dispute, there's a difference of opinion, but if you are happy with saying that at least some attributes of Allah are eternal, then these ones will definitely be eternal according to you. And this is based on obviously these classical debates and discussions. Then you have the names referring to the essence and the act. ما يدل على الوجود مع إضافة إلى فعل من أفعاله كالجواد والرزاق والخالق والمعز والمذل وأمثاله. So you have names referring to Allah's essence plus an act, like the creator, the provider, the honorer, the abaser. There's actually quite a thing going around from these Christians, the ones that try to defame Islam, saying, "Oh, Allah is al-Mu'izz, Allah is Mudhil, the one that abases, the one that disgraces, abases. Allah is Ad-Dar, the one that causes harm." But of course, this is based on the fact that Allah is the one that gives rise to everything. So because there is no actual power, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, this is something that we believe in as Muslims, that Allah is the one that has all power, power belongs to him. No one can do anything unless Allah gives permission for that to happen. So although Allah, and we've already explained how Allah's commands, are not necessarily the same as his will. And so his will is what determines what possibility will arise, and these possibilities, for example, even if they appear evil to us, like suffering, they were created by Allah at the end of the day, and that's why we give him these attributes, because he's the one that created this. There's no one that actually can give you harm unless Allah permits it. Allah is the one that creates everything and causes everything. Of course, it's more respectful to say that certain things like illness, we normally don't attribute these things to Allah, even though Allah is the one that creates them. It's just a language thing. So these attributes, there's a dispute. So some affirm that these are true in pre-eternity, or else it would imply that Allah would change. And then others deny. They say they are not true in eternity because the act did not yet exist. So how does Imam Ghazali resolve this? Then his analogy is there could be a sword in a sheath. So the sword is still something which cuts, is sharp. So when it's in its sheath, then it refers to its cutting potential, and when it's used, it's talking about the cutting being used in actuality. Or another one is water in a jug is still quenching, even before it's true. This is true for water even before anyone drinks it due to its capacity. So it might be better not to use the word potential and actuality because of the confusion that might arise from using those terms in philosophical circles. But I guess the water in a jug is a better example. Then also Allah is called the creator eternally in the sense of eternal power. His power always exists, readiness to create, but not creator in the actualized sense until creation happens. Okay, so it's a semantic issue, you could say. So Allah is a creator and then you're saying, is he now, before he wasn't a creator, now he is the creator, so has he changed? Well, the power was always there. The power was always there, and the will, if it were not for the will determining when, from pre-eternity, when the power would be actualized, then everything would have been created as simultaneously from eternity, with Allah, the will determined that these things should not be so. The will determined that the universe will come into existence from nothing and will not be eternal. So therefore, Allah is still the creator, because in His will it was determined that He will create, and He has not changed. It's just a semantic issue, once again. Final clarification: both affirmers and deniers are correct depending on the intended meaning. So those that affirm, they are referring to, I guess you could say, potentiality, but Imam Ghazali does use that terminology. So you could say he moves away from that Greek emphasis on saying God is pure act. When he says, فَهُوَ فِي الْغَمْدِ صَارِمٌ بِالْقُوَّةِ, so when the sword is in its sheath, it is something which is cutting in potential. It has a cutting potential. وَعِنْدَ حُصُولِ الْقَطْعِ, and when it does actually cut, then صَارِمٌ بِالْفِعْلِ, it is actualized, the cutting is actualized. وَكَذَلِكَ الْمَاءُ فِي الْكَوْزِ يُسَمَّى مَرْوِيًا, وَعِنْ the shurbi يُسَمَّى مَرْوِيًا as well. So water is called something which quenches thirst even before it's drank. But one is referring to potentiality, one is referring to actuality. So the conclusion of this section is that he mentioned 7 attributes, same 7 main claims as well. We said that 3 things about power. There were 5 objections under this kalam. And then we said there were 4 things that we discussed about the attributes. So right at the beginning of this 4th ruling, there was that problem about how do we categorize the attributes. Can we say all of them? Allah was all of them from eternity. Like we know of something like 99 at least attributes or names of Allah. So we're saying the ones that were related to acts, there was a difference of opinion, and this was now answered in this 4th category. And we said that it's permissible, both are permissible, as long as you acknowledge that it's just a semantic issue. So really there were 20 foundational issues that were discussed here. And then we are going, inshallah, to the next qutub. Also just an issue that I need to raise here, that although the word quwwa, which means potentiality, was used, it's just metaphorically to explain the name and the application of the divine attributes in relation to Allah's time-bound effects. So Imam Ghazali is not affirming an ontological potentiality in Allah. The sword analogy only serves to bridge language and metaphysics. It's not to suggest that Allah undergoes change or actualization, because it's just the words. It's semantic. There's a problem of bridging between language and ontology. And inshallah we'll continue with the 3rd section next time.